Warning: suicide and death. This content addresses mental health issues, including research and narratives on suicide. Please take care while engaging with it and only proceed if you feel safe doing so. If you or someone you love is having thoughts of suicide, please contact 988. Help is available. Welcome. This is your host, Lisa Meeks. Over the last 3 years, I've had the immense blessing of getting to know John and Jennifer Ruddell. Together, we've worked to produce a special series on medical training and suicide. Our series is dedicated to the memory of Dr. Jack Ruddell and to the memory of all medical trainees lost to suicide. John, Jennifer, and I hope our work sparks new conversations and accelerates policies and practices in medical training that improve learner engagement and help seeking, and reduce the drivers that contribute to the erosion of medical trainee well-being. We'll begin with an introduction by our consult psychiatrist and narrator, Dr. Joseph Murray.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Joe Murray, a psychiatrist at Weill Cornell Medical College. I've had the privilege of working with Dr. Lisa Meeks and with this podcast for many years, and I serve as a consultant on this series. Throughout, I'll pop up to share some information and background. I want to provide a content warning for this episode and for this series in general. Today's episode delves into sensitive topics, including depression, suicidality, and suicide, as we explore the story of a medical learner, Jack Ruddell, who lost his life to suicide. This series addresses the high rates of burnout, depression, and suicide among medical trainees. However, it's more than just a report on the state of mental health in the field. While these topics are often discussed through raw numbers or statistics, at its heart, this is a deeply personal loss. We'll present the facts through the story of Jack Ruddell, a promising medical student whose life was cut tragically short, highlighting the complex interplay of various contributing factors. By sharing Jack's story, we aim to reduce the stigma surrounding suicide and mental health issues, provide guidance to medical schools on fostering a healthier culture, and direct listeners to the available resources. Our hope is that by bringing Jack's experience to light, we can illuminate a pathway littered within the hidden curriculum of fear, stigma, and shame, and implore medical schools and training programs to create a more compassionate and supportive training environment. We also hope to encourage other medical learners to seek the help they need. We understand that this content may be distressing, so please proceed with caution. If at any point you feel overwhelmed, it's okay to take a break and return later. If you're struggling with your mental health or experiencing suicidal thoughts, please remember that help is available. You can call or text 988 to connect directly with the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, where trained professionals are ready to support you. It's okay to reach out and share your feelings. You are not alone. This series has been created over a period of 2 years and has involved interviews from prominent researchers and organizations on the topic. Throughout the series, you'll hear from these experts, Jack's friend, and others with lived experiences of suicidality and suicide. The first episode of this series was recorded live with the Ruddells, where the discussion introduces you to Jack Ruddell.
Welcome to today's episode. Today I'm joined by John and Jennifer Ruddell, parents of Dr. Jack Ruddell. Today is bittersweet for everyone. We're having a conversation that is around suicide and medical training and medical education. We're gathered in Los Angeles, where Jack was raised and did a lot of his formative years. And so today's been particularly difficult because his parents have now returned to LA for this interview, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. John and Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you for having us. I'm Jennifer Ruddell, and I am the proud mother of 3 sons, Jack Howard Ruddell being the youngest.
And I'm John Ruddell, and I'm Jack's dad, along with 2 of his brothers who I'm immensely proud of. It is a little additional sentiment that we come here with today because it is in this wonderful neighborhood that the boys did grow up, and there's so many memories. All of us doing things that families do, even of Jack in his high school years, having roles here at the hospital and with certain doctors during the summer, and just really getting a sense of medicine in this very area. So a lot of sentiment that comes rushing through.
The tragic loss of Jack Ruddell underscores a critical issue within the medical community, the mental health crisis among medical students. While this podcast series will incorporate Jack's story, it's important to recognize that his experiences, though deeply impactful, do not represent those of all medical students. Jack's journey serves as a starting point for a broader conversation about the pressures and challenges faced by aspiring healthcare providers. We will explore various risk factors contributing to mental health struggles, including academic pressure, long hours, sleep loss, burnout, depression, anxiety, bullying, financial burdens, and discrimination. As we introduce Jack, it's essential to note that while his narrative will be intertwined with discussions on the drivers of suicide and the issues many medical students face, not all of these factors applied to him, and to clarify that not every student will experience these challenges to the same degree. We cover the topic broadly to encompass the multifaceted issues that contribute to a learner becoming unwell. But to suggest that any one aspect was what led to Jack's situation would be a gross oversimplification of Jack's experience. Our goal is to open a broad dialogue about these issues, better understanding and preventing future tragedies, and fostering a more supportive environment for all medical students.
And you visited with your son yesterday?
Yes, we did. We're not going to go and see Jack's resting place because it looked like it was going to be a gray day. But as it always happens when we're here, the sun came out and it's always shining. So yes, we had a beautiful visit, and it's so hard.
I can't imagine the strength that it took to be here. And we and our audience are immensely appreciative. And as we spoke about yesterday, I said, I don't know when and where or how, but I know this is going to save a life. And I know that in 1 year and 5 years and 10 years, you sharing this story and us sharing the resources will be responsible for getting people to the help that they need and to calling for actionable change in medical education. So I am eternally grateful for you. And I know Jack would be really happy with what is happening here today.
He is proud. I feel it.
And part of what drives us is telling Jack's story, which is a beautiful story. Just an amazing young man, and did so much in 25 years. It's unbelievable.
He lived a lifetime.
He did, and he just really also left some very important lessons while he was alive, and contributions to medicine and research, but I think mostly the impact on others. And part of what drives us is also just sort of continuing on what we know Jack would have done had he lived, because that's who Jack was. He had tremendous empathy, and he was one who had very strong convictions, and there's no doubt that going through what he went through as an individual in the medical education process, he definitely noted things that he would have come back to and really tried to put on the table and make a difference.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Jack, let's let our audience get to know Jack a little bit better. Tell me about your son.
Oh, Jack, it's hard to encapsulate. He's just a joy-filled young boy who was just happy and sort of had a zest for life. And that describes Jack throughout his life. But as a boy, he grew up with two older brothers who he admired greatly. He loved them, and the feeling was mutual. So it was just this group of brothers who were always together and always having fun.
Full of hijinks.
Yeah, and Jack was right in the center of it. And Jack, by his nature, was just genuinely interested and curious. He had no hesitation to put himself out there and try new things, even as a child. And so his life was really full of all sorts of activities that he embraced and ultimately found passions and wonderful friends. And he loved to just make people happy, and he just kind of always had that song going, and he tended to just brighten up the room, and a lot of that was with music. So he was so many things, but I think what's important to know about Jack is who he really was at his essence. And everybody has different ways of describing that. His friends, his family, but they're all focused on the same thing. And if we were to put it into words, I think it would be something like pure of heart. Jack just had a singular compass that just was honesty. And that was as a young child, but that carried through his full life. And there was no other dimension than what you got. You saw Jack in his genuine state, and he was very compassionate. He was very direct in a kind way, and he cared about others. And so at his core, Jack was just a very compassionate, very genuine young man. And we're so proud of that. And I think that he has inspired a lot of people just because of who he was.
Joining us today is Roja, a close friend and later girlfriend of Jack. Roja was an integral part of Jack's life during his time in medical school. As someone who shared his academic journey and personal life, Roja brings a unique and intimate understanding of the pressures faced by medical students. By sharing her experiences, Roja helps us paint a more complete picture of Jack and the world he inhabited.
Jack was really funny. It's the first thing that comes to mind when I think about him. He was a light, just so kind and warm that you could feel that warmth across a room. I remember first meeting him early freshman year of college, and we weren't close at the time and didn't become close for a while, but even in those short interactions, just felt so welcomed and warm in his presence. I think that speaks a lot to who he is, who he was as a person. Always a smile, always the life of the party, but always willing to go deeper. He was the friend that you would text when you're having a tough day. He was the roommate who would go out of his way to kill the spider for you. He was the close friend and many of our friends that would be the first call. But I think more than anything, Jack was just deeply good. I think it's rare, particularly in some of the worlds that I'm in, but in general, to meet people who are so pure and everything that you can describe their character as is just good. I don't think he had a bad bone or a mean bone in his body. He was just always kind to everyone. He was incredibly caring and thoughtful with the people that he loved. But I think what actually amazes me most about Jack is how caring and thoughtful he was with people he didn't even know well at all. He was incredibly caring and loving to me. And I think that's the thing that I try to carry forward the most, remembering Jack, like the way that I am with the people that I love and being a little bit more like him. But I think what just sticks out to me is, remember, sometimes when I'd have a friend from college or a different phase of my life come and visit or stay with us in medical school, or we'd go to a dinner with a stranger that is a distant friend of mine and someone that Jack had never met before, just how engaged and caring he was about their life. And none of it came across like he had any agenda, because he didn't. He just really cared and cared about people and other humans and wanting to make them feel seen and heard and cared for. That attention to other people's potential needs and humanity is just something that is so rare.
What brought Jack to medicine? What made him want to be a physician?
Well, he had some wonderful doctors in his life that I think were inspiring and opened his eyes to medicine.
And that started way back in kindergarten when he met his neurologist. Jack was very inquisitive. And I almost wanted to warn them in advance that we're coming to see you, but you're going to have to double book, because he always had questions. And the docs were so patient with him and would answer his every question. He was very curious.
He had an orthopedist that he would go to, and I say he would go to because he was
busy and he was active.
He was active, and he had sports injuries and broke his wrist twice in soccer. And this doctor would let him look at the x-rays. And
he would teach him how to read it. And you see here, and here's your old break, and here's your new one.
And Jack would just pepper him with questions. And he was kind enough to just answer and explain. Through those associations, Jack saw that, number one, doctors can be very focused and understanding of their patients, and they can really find ways that are very personalized to heal or to support someone who's either injured or has a condition.
Well, the research does show us that individuals that have disabilities or that have a chronic health condition or have been a patient oftentimes do have more empathy. And much of the time, this is kind of what drives them to medicine, is that experience and the desire to help others.
He was definitely a young man for others.
He was.
Yeah.
And we've talked about disabilities, certain disabilities that Jack had. And I think it's very important to recognize the fact that those who have those are in many ways more uniquely qualified to serve patients, and to especially serve patients who themselves have disabilities, because they understand and they have a level of insight that others just can't have. And so those are the sorts of things that drove Jack. They apply very much to his life.
While Jack's high levels of empathy made him deeply compassionate towards others, he was also very inquisitive and goal-oriented. As you'll hear from his parents in Roja, Jack held himself to a very high standard, constantly striving to achieve his best in everything he pursued.
Jack had a real thirst for learning, and he set very high standards for himself in school. And I want to emphasize that those were self-imposed. we as parents encouraged all of our sons to be well-rounded. Don't take all the APs. Don't take all the honors. Enjoy life.
It's okay to get a B.
It's okay to get a B. And Jack just couldn't do it. He just gave everything 110%.
Just set very high standards for himself.
He did.
And he just pushed himself. And,
Yeah.
and as a parent, it's very rare that you find yourself trying to discourage your child from staying up late to do homework. And there literally were times when I recall saying, Jack, it's okay, it's this
You gotta
hour,
go to
and
bed. Yeah.
it's just don't.
Put it away.
And he would just quietly go about his work.
This sentiment was shared by his friend Roja.
His work ethic was unbelievable. I've never seen anyone just be able to study the way that he did and crank out papers the way that he did. And I think it was just this absolute determination to be excellent. And he just was. He wasn't the guy who wouldn't try at all and get a 98 on the exam, but he's the guy who would try super hard and always get that 98 on the exam. It was so refreshing to see somebody not hide how hard they worked or try to make it out to be like, it just all comes easy to me. He's like, no, I have to work really hard. And he did. And he did it with so much, so much humility. And he put so much of himself into it. Because I think it wasn't even for him, it wasn't about the numbers or the accomplishments. Like, he really wanted to learn the information and be a good doctor. And that purity is just so rare.
What are some potential contributors to becoming unwell in medicine? There are many factors that can impact medical students. One is the type of student who is attracted to medicine, individuals with a strong desire for excellence. These are students who have spent years striving to master complex subjects, achieve top grades, and navigate highly competitive environments. Many are perfectionists by nature, driven by a relentless pursuit of flawless performance. In many ways, this perfectionism can be a strength, fueling the dedication and precision required to provide high-quality patient care. However, it can also be a double-edged sword. Another factor is the culture of medicine, which can amplify this inclination towards perfection, creating an environment where mistakes are perceived as unacceptable and even a small error can feel catastrophic. This expectation of infallibility places immense pressure on medical students who may already be grappling with the transition from academic success to the unpredictable realities of clinical practice. For many, the fear of making mistakes and the constant striving for perfection can lead to feelings of inadequacy, imposter syndrome, and burnout. Dr. Christine Moutier, a leading authority on suicide prevention and Chief Medical Officer of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, describes how the transition to the rigorous medical school setting can be overwhelming for students accustomed to academic success.
I think of things like the psychological attributes as well, like perfectionism and shame, which we physicians have, for whatever reason, just a higher preponderance of these high driving self-expectations. They probably do us some good in allowing us to achieve and persevere and succeed, but then they do us harm and can even be life-threatening when they are left unchecked when it comes to our mental health and getting the help that we need. So in the environment of medical school, where it might be that young person's first experience after working, achieve, and they've landed in medical school. And it might be their first experience where their sleep, their mood, their anxiety goes to a different level of disruption, perhaps than they've ever experienced before. What we try to help medical students understand is those are human experiences.
For Jack and many others, depression and anxiety are daily challenges that can intensify during medical training, often leading to sleep deprivation and heightened stress. In an environment that is often unforgiving and where seeking help may be discouraged, either directly or indirectly, it's easy to see how students can find themselves struggling.
Behind the scenes, this was another layer that Jack was going through. Jack was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. And collectively or individually, that's a mental disability. And so Jack was treated. Jack had a wonderful doctor, therapy, medication. He had those opportunities to have that available to him, and he took that very seriously. So in that perspective, looking at what Jack had taken on and what medical students take on, and having certain disabilities in terms of mental disabilities, in terms of his learning challenges, in terms of his related impacts of insomnia. And so these layers just add up, and they're not always apparent to anyone who's observing their colleague or their friend or their student, but they're there. We knew Jack, and we talked to Jack, and he was very responsible in dealing with these, and I think most of these things were just not known by his peers. So his time at medical school was made that much more difficult, and that's makes much of what he accomplished academically and through research just all the more amazing. And I think more importantly, it makes the fact that Jack was able to just be Jack in spite of these pressures just really just something we're very, very proud of. And I think that says a lot about his courage and his fortitude to just forge ahead. There are other layers in med school and in that environment that Jack and others have to deal with, and one of those, for example, is what is commonly known as aggressions from doctors or those who a student might be working with or a resident might be working with. And in Jack's instance, he was publicly shamed by a doctor. He was in a rotation and with the rounding group, and one morning this doctor began the day by calling Jack out and just humiliating him. And it was embarrassing, it was hurtful, it damaged his confidence, and it was in front of his peers and those who naturally he wanted to impress. And more importantly, what bothered him in that case was the incident that this doctor was criticizing him for was Jack had spent extra time beyond the end of his shift, which itself was precious time, ends at 2 a.m, and he had stayed behind to spend time with the family of a patient who was struggling. And Jack saw this situation, he saw the struggle, and he was Jack. Of course. He sat down, he spent time with them, and to be chastised for showing compassion and something that was very much part of Jack was even more disappointing. So those things we've learned happen much more than they should. Others that Jack worked with in that setting later came up and just acknowledged that, Jack, you didn't deserve that. That was way out of line. It was inappropriate. And Jack shared that with us. He shared it with his friends. But as we found out, something that is all too common is he chose not to report it. And he chose not to report it because of the fear of retribution. It just wasn't safe to do in his perspective. And he also had friends and classmates who had experiences they had shared where they just did not see any meaningful action taken in those situations. And these can be sexual harassment, various forms of things. And so when the process is not one that's trusted, you just sort of suck it up and move on. But those things are so unnecessary. They're so unbelievable. They create so much damage to an individual's confidence, and that just gets seared in your memory. And if there isn't an environment where you trust to report these things and trust that these will be taken care of, that's a big risk. So again, these layers of stressors, they're there, they're present, and for Jack, they really added up. There are things outside of the school environment as well as a medical student that we observed with Jack's friends, with Jack, and in his case, that included some mean-spirited bullying from a past relationship that was just very stressful and uncalled for, but that came at a time when Jack was so focused on trying to be well and studying and dealing with all these other things that this just did more damage. So those things outside of school, it may be family for some students, it may be financial for some students, relationships. I think the point is that you have this base level of stress and burden of just doing your schoolwork and in the classroom and in rotations and tests and OSCEs and all these things. And then you add, in Jack's case, this tremendous amount of research. That in and of itself is stressful, but you add these layers and it creates just a vulnerability for people to just not be well. The point of all that, I think, is that there needs to be a safe environment. By that I mean safe in the eyes of the student to come forth and say, I'm having a tough time.
Yeah, it's not normalized to have an issue.
Yeah. Depression is generally seen as a sign of weakness. I think it's understood by students that that's not something that you share. And so when that, as an example, is something that just has to be hidden away, it's just not a good environment for a student. And that was Jack's experience.
It's a medical condition, just like any other medical illness. If I had pneumonia, or if I had something else, you would give me time. They would give me time to go seek assistance and help.
It's stigmatized.
It's stigmatized. Definitely.
As it is in society, of course. And I think as we talk about mental disability, we talk about depression, in general, that's becoming something that is more and more a topic of discussion. But surprisingly, among those who would be most acutely aware of what it is and how it can manifest itself and how common it is, to sustain that environment where it's unsafe to talk about it, much less seek help, is just astounding. Schools need to deflate the stigma. Schools need to just put these things on the table. That includes disabilities. That includes any number of things. That includes risk of suicide. Let's talk about suicide. Let's talk about how this arises, and let's not sweep it under the rug. And until that gets culturally normalized as part of the dialogue, it will just be something that is dealt with as something that is shameful and that is not safe to reach out for help.
As the Ruddells emphasize and the literature supports, the intense demands of medical school, coupled with the pressures of academic excellence and managing clinical responsibilities, can severely impact students' mental well-being. Burnout, anxiety, and depression are common, yet often remain unaddressed. To delve into this critical issue, we spoke with Dr. Jessi Gold, a respected psychiatrist and author of How Do You Feel? We asked her how the medical school environment contributes to the development of mental health challenges among students.
I think we learn at a really young age that we need to prioritize school and everyone else before we prioritize ourselves. We go into medicine to care for others, and most people write in their applications, I just want to help people, I just want to help people. And in that context, where does helping yourself fit in? I don't really think it does. And I think we kind of approach everything like that. So we're just really focused on grades or really focused on competing because we have to get spots, and then really focused on learning to then be able to help people. And our feelings, our physical body sensations, our awareness of ourselves in sort of the narrative just gets pushed down and pushed down and pushed down to the point that we don't even really notice it anymore. We also, in the context of competition, look next to us and everyone else looks unhappy. They're not eating and not sleeping and not functioning. So we kind of have this thought that maybe that's just what this is. Everybody's supposed to feel this way. And if for some reason, when everybody feels this way, if I also feel this way, but think it's pathologic or think something's wrong with me, then it's a weakness, right? Because if everyone's sad, but the sadness I feel is something that needs treatment, that's not really what you want to be known for. You want to be known for good grades. You want to be known for good evaluations. You want to be known as a good clinician. And it feels like it gets in the way of that. And so we try not to stand out for anything, let alone that. I mean, we wear the same outfits, right? Like we all are in white coats that are short, then white coats that are long, then some degree of whatever kind of professionalism outfit. We don't want to stand out. And it's really easy to stand out when you actually admit you have a problem or you actually ask for help because no one else is doing it, or it feels like no one else is doing it. It's like Fight Club, right? You can't admit that there's a Fight Club. We're here. We have to protect it. We protect each other. And it becomes this sort of culture where even if you come in one way, you leave another, because that was the only way you really survived within it. So if you're the vocal person who says, that's wrong, we shouldn't do that, why do we do that? Then they say you complain, or they say you're problematic, or they say something really mean on a subjective evaluation that could affect you to get into residency. And so you learn that at least to survive in training, you need to be a certain way. And that way is decided by years and years of medical symbolism and stoicism as the ideal. We should have had a reckoning with this a long time ago, but reckoning with it now, it shouldn't be because of bad outcomes. We should have been reckoning with it when we realized people at all were struggling. It shouldn't be only when you have no choice because something really bad happens.
While perfectionism and the need to excel academically can weigh heavily on all medical students, those with disabilities face an additional set of challenges. For these students, the journey through medical school is often fraught with unique difficulties that go beyond the already demanding curriculum and intense pressure. Navigating this path can feel like trying to solve a complex puzzle without all the pieces.
Jack did have his struggles. Jack was diagnosed with Tourette's when he was in kindergarten, first grade, and it manifested itself through just simple motor and vocal tics. It was hard at first. He didn't understand what it was, and we didn't either. And at first we just thought he was clearing his throat or rolling his eyes at us. But we took him to see his doctor, and then were referred to a neurologist whom Jack saw for several years. And through medication and therapy, Jack just kind of rolled with it. There were times when it was difficult. Growing up, and you kind of have noises or movements that people don't understand, you can be teased. When Jack was in 4th grade, he came home and said, "Mom, I really think that my classmates and my friends just don't understand what it is. And if I share with them and teach them what Tourette's is, it'll be okay." And so together with the teacher, he put together his own lecture and stood up in front of his class and educated them. And Jack really, he was not a shrinking violet. He took care of himself and stood up for himself. I'm really proud of him. And I think he was proud of himself too.
Medical students with disabilities may encounter barriers that their peers do not. These can range from difficulties in processing and retaining vast amounts of information quickly to challenges in demonstrating their knowledge in high-stakes testing environments. The fast-paced, often unforgiving nature of medical education can exacerbate these struggles, making it even more challenging for these students to succeed. Students often have to fight for their right to accommodations, whether it's extra time on exams, alternative formats for learning materials, or other supports that are vital for their success. This can be a tiring and emotionally draining process, adding another layer of stress to an already challenging journey. Beyond the academic challenges, there's also the weight of stigma. Despite growing awareness and advocacy for inclusivity, students with disabilities may still face skepticism about their capabilities. There's often an unspoken expectation in medicine that everyone should fit a certain mold, one that doesn't always accommodate different learning needs. This stigma can lead to feelings of isolation, as students with disabilities might hesitate to disclose their disability or to seek the accommodations they need. Indeed, research shows us that approximately 1 in 4 medical students that need accommodations in medical school will not request them. The fear of being judged or misunderstood can be incapacitating, creating a sense of invisibility within the very system they are striving to be a part of.
There are other layers that are part of med school, that are part of life, that just continue to sort of add to those pressures. In Jack's case, one of those layers was his Tourette's. He was diagnosed in high school with certain learning challenges. His retention, his ability to process was really compromised. Jack was able to get help to obtain tools, understand different methodologies to use, to learn, to manage his time. And in high school, he was approved for accommodations, given a bit of time for his examinations. So Jack brought that with him into medical school, and most never knew that because he just quietly dealt with it.
He had a brilliant mind, and he made the best of his unique qualities. So this is a picture that someone took, and then they did a needlepoint.
That's beautiful.
And I love it because really looks three-dimensional to me.
That's so nice.
And real.
And we have so many wonderful pictures of our boys and of Jack, and we, of course, have gone through them and gathered those and shared those and used those, and they're wonderful reminders of just how happy his life was. And I think that's a little bit of a consolation. It's just he was loved. He had so much joy in his life, and there is so much tragedy in what happened that it's a good reminder periodically for us to remember just the zest he had for life during his life, and the joy and the music and
The joy he shared with
yeah,
others.
and I think that's probably the most important thing. Just his friendships and his interactions with others is really what he thrived on. He loved his friends, and he cared deeply about them. That was a gift to his friends, but that was also very important to Jack, and it was a gift to him.
I love the way you celebrate him. I imagine that in the wake of loss that is the result of a suicide, that people carry a shame. I think it may keep them silent and not in this space that you and John seem to have been able to find together, which is so lovely, of being able to celebrate him and remember him fondly and look at all of the positives and talk about him and keep him alive.
So important.
It is.
So important.
Talk about him. I love to talk about Jack.
It is.
I love when people mention his name or want to know about him, or he's our son and he's a little brother, and he was very special.
And he was, and
He was a gift.
He lived a brilliant life, and we're proud of him. We're proud of his story. We were very close to Jack, and are very close to his brothers, and in constant contact. And so we knew who Jack was. We knew what Jack struggled with. We knew what Jack went through. We knew how Jack drove himself. And so even in his death, we look at him as just brave, and what he went through to try to live and survive. We're just so proud of him, and we're crushed, but that's the perspective that we have on Jack. And
He
there
had
is
great courage.
it
He
was
lived
just-
with great courage. He did, but no one can know what his layers were, or how they lapped over each other, and how it affected him internally.
As you've described him to me, as I've come to know him, the singular word that stands out to me is joy.
Yeah.
Just joy in life, joy in the work and the research and his friendships.
Yes. Yes.
I think that we'll no doubt talk about his experiences and his version of the things that we all go through, but I think it's important to sort of point out that in spite of the challenges he had, that remained Jack at his core. I mean,
Right.
people who knew Jack just knew him as life-filled, giving, full of joy, and that is from beginning to end. He never really wavered from just
Who he
being
was.
that person at his core.
And I think it's important to be able to hold those two truths as we go through this interview. That you can be both someone who is full of joy in life and someone who struggles at times.
As you've just heard, it's crucial to recognize that depression doesn't exist in isolation. It intertwines with the full spectrum of human experience. Even as we discuss the challenges Jack faced, we must hold space for the reality that he was also a person of immense joy, accomplishment, and warmth. Depression and joy can coexist, and one does not negate the other. By acknowledging both, we honor Jack in his entirety, celebrating the vibrant life he led while recognizing the struggles he faced. This duality is also essential to understanding and supporting those in our community who may be going through similar experiences.
This episode is part of a broader series dedicated to exploring the critical issue of medical training and suicide. We invite you to continue with us on this journey by tuning into the next episode, where we review the complexities and drivers of suicidal ideation and suicide, and its impact within the context of medical training. This episode is brought to you by the Docs with Disabilities Initiative, with executive production led by myself, Dr. Lisa Meeks, alongside Riley Betchko, John and Jennifer Ruddell, and our consulting psychiatrist and narrator, Dr. Joseph Murray. We strongly encourage medical schools and training programs to engage with this content, utilizing it as a resource to foster important discussions and drive meaningful change.